All right, so welcome everyone to those who are with us here and those who will join as we go on, which is what happened last week. I expect that'll probably happen this week, and also to those who will watch this on video after the fact. So let's begin with a prayer as we usually do, and then I'll talk a little bit about a couple of things, and then we'll try to have some questions and answers. So we'll ask everyone to prepare some questions, so that'll make the thing more dynamic. O heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of Truth, who art ever present and fillest all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and dwell in us and cleanse us of all impurity and save our souls. Okay, very good. So welcome to those who are with us and to those who will join. Yesterday, we had a very nice gospel. This is the gospel where the lawyer asks the Lord, how can I be saved? And he talks about loving the Lord with all your mind and all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself. I was in Canada yesterday at the wedding of JC and Maria Meyer, and I want to congratulate them and Carl and Julia, to our longtime parishioners. Their oldest daughter is Maria, and they were married there. Thank God we were at the children's camp there north of Toronto, about 2 hours drive. And there's a really nice little chapel there, so we were able to serve liturgy in the morning and have the wedding in the afternoon. And what I talked about in the sermon there was that this command of the Lord is an aspirational thing, and we should see it as that. How many of us can really say that we love the Lord with all our mind, all our heart, all our soul, and all our strength, and really love our neighbor as ourselves? Probably very few, but it's something that we need to strive for. So I think it's a good gospel for us in our days. We build strength by resistance, and so if we're striving, yeah, maybe there's some resistance, but we can really grow stronger in our faith. So that, I think, is a really nice message. This coming weekend is our festival, so this week is a lot of festival all the time. We ask people to please note that the service times are different on the festival weekend. Vespers at 7 o'clock on Saturday evening, and then there's a church tour, and then Divine Liturgy at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, so that we can have a minute to breathe and then jump right back in and be ready to welcome our guests at the festival at 1 o'clock. So that's what's happening there. We do still have a couple of liturgies though this week, even though it's a busy week. We'll have our first, well, not our first, I guess our first was last week, but we'll have our school, our Ann Arbor Orthodox Classical Academy Divine Liturgy on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, and then the Feast of the Nativity of the Virgin is Thursday, and we'll have liturgy at 8 o'clock on that day as well. All right, so a couple of people sent in questions, so I want to get to those, and then we'll ask questions from those who are gathered here with us. So the first question is the God of the Old Testament the same as the God of the New Testament? And this was asked in the context of, in the Old Testament, God is very strong with the people, and it seems like in the New Testament that God is full of love and very forgiving with people. And the answer is that that's pretty true. It's not that God is without love in the Old Testament, and it's not that God is never strict with us in the New Testament, but surely God meets the people where they are and tries to raise them to a higher place. And in the Old Testament, people were a lot rougher. It was a different time. People needed a stronger hand. Whereas in the New Testament, I guess it's not so much that we don't need a stronger hand, but God is very much loving towards us. And we call the gospel the law of love. That Christ came and brought to people. So it is absolutely the same God, the Holy Trinity, but the approach is a little bit different because, well, people need different things in different historical epochs. So, okay, Daryl got kicked off, but he's back, and that's great. Speaking of which, someone asked a question about God, the Holy Trinity. I think that the easiest way for us to remember our teaching about God, the Holy Trinity, is to look at how we hold our fingers when we make the sign of the cross. We hold these three fingers together to remind us that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and we have these two fingers on our hand to remind us that Jesus Christ is completely God and completely man. The question was asked actually in the context of Islam, because in Islam we are accused of committing the greatest sin, which is to have many gods, but we don't have many gods. We have one God, the only true God, the Holy Trinity. So I think that's an important little piece, and I'm glad that question was asked and we got a chance to answer it, and I hope the person who asked it gets a chance to watch this video. Of course, I will be happy to answer outside the video, but I thought that that would be a good one to talk about. All right, so that's a couple of things that people sent in. First, I wonder if those who are with us have any questions that they would like to ask. All right, I put a couple of more things in my talking points just in case. Those first few things didn't engender a dynamic conversation. So sometimes we're asked who should sit and who should stand in the church. It's actually a really good question, because if you go to most Orthodox churches, you'll find that there are not pews or chairs that are lined up like you might find in a Catholic church, let's say, or in a Protestant church. You do find Orthodox churches like that, but I would say that the majority are not, and certainly in the old country, that was not really a thing. You just don't find that. And what's interesting, a lot of people don't know this, if you get a chance to go to Rome, and I hope everybody does, to see the beautiful holy sites there, even though a lot of them are Roman Catholic, yes, that's true, but many date back even to the time before the church split. The cathedrals there also do not have pews. You can find a bunch of chairs stacked up in the corner that are brought out, but they were not designed, they were not built with pews. They were built exactly the same way as Orthodox churches are, where people are expected to stand. So that's, I think, a really interesting data point. What it means exactly, I don't know, but I just find that very interesting that also in the ancient practices of the Catholic Church, everyone stood as well. So generally then, those who are healthy would be before God standing. We're either before God standing or prostrate, but sitting is not the usual way that we are before God. Now, if someone is tired, if someone is sick, someone is pregnant, of course, it's perfectly okay to sit down. There's no sin in that, and that's why we have benches around the church. It's not that we expect people to never, ever sit, but they're there exactly for that reason, so that those who need them can use them, but those who don't need them would stand. And that's a good thing, because we could never fit everybody into the church if we had to provide seating for everyone who comes to church at St. Vladimir's. We can really put quite a few more people in the church because of the fact that we stand. So I think that's very interesting. So yes, if you're tired, to sit is nothing evil, but there are certainly times of the service when we would want to stand. That would be generally for the Divine Liturgy, the Great Ectenia. So the first of the Ectenias, and this is generally when those three lights are turned on above the royal doors. That's a pretty good surrogate for knowing when you should stand. So during that time, surely during the reading of the epistle and the gospel, we would stand. Actually, the Ectenia right before the Great Entrance is kind of a second Great Ectenia. We won't go into that too deeply, but that would be a good time to stand. And I would say during the Chirivicum and the Great Entrance, when the gifts are brought forth, that's the time that we would want to stand if we can. And surely during the time of the consecration of the gifts, which is from the Nicene Creed that we all sing together, until after the choir sings, "It is truly meet." Actually, the consecration goes on a little bit after that. It's when the priest says, "And may the mercies of our great Lord and God and Savior Jesus Christ be with you all," and blesses the people. But in any case, about that time. And surely when the gifts come out as well, we would stand. And if we could remain standing, even if we're not going to communion, that's ideal as well. So anyway, that gives us a rough idea. I put onto our website what happened? I just admitted Grisha. There he is. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Grisha. Welcome. I put onto our website this last week the little schema about the three lights above the doors, so you could have a look at that at any time. You might have to go to the second page of the website, but anyway, it's not very far down because it was on last week. And also, as promised, I put the schema about when to do prostrations during weekday services. We have a lot of weekday services coming up in September, and I think and October as well, and I think it'd be interesting for people to know that. So that's who should stand and who should sit in the church, and that's a little bit about when we should and should not move in the church anymore. Okay, so that's a little bit of introductory information, and I see that Lydia has her hand raised, so I'll let you ask the question.
Okay, Father, so I'm a little unclear, and this may seem like a silly question, but coming from another Greek Orthodox, a little different. Prostration versus a bow. To me, a prostration is when you fully get down on your knees and your head touches the ground and you come up to and then go back down again for another prostration or whatever. And a bow is simply when you bow at your waist and you cross yourself and touch the ground. And so am I correct in that distinguishing those two, or am I incorrect?
I don't know. You're correct. It's interesting. In Russian, they're both called poklon, but there's poyasny and there's zemny. So there's the prostration from the waist and the prostration to the ground. But yes, you're right. On Sundays and then on Saturday nights, because Saturday nights are also the celebration of the resurrection, we don't do those prostrations to the ground. Whereas, honestly, on most other days, that's the standard. Most days of the church calendar would be days where there are prostrations. And of course, we don't serve every day. And even if we did, most people couldn't go to church every day in our days. So we sort of think of not doing those prostrations to the ground as the usual practice. But in fact, that's the unusual practice, and the usual practice is to do prostrations to the ground during the service. So anyway, you're absolutely right on that distinction. And if you get a chance to look at the website, I put together a little flyer that has sort of those times. And we would do the bows from the waist on Sundays when we would otherwise do prostrations to the ground on weekdays.
Perfect. So my other question is, in the Greek Orthodox Church that I came from, when you're saying you've consecrated and you're saying thine own, do we offer unto thee? Typically, where I come from, we bow and we stay at a bow until you start commemorating the the Virgin. Is that incorrect? Or is that correct?
I wouldn't say it's. I would not say that it's incorrect or necessarily correct. I think that the thing about the beauty about Orthodox Christianity is that there is a wide diversity of practices, and we have the opportunity when we visit other places to see some of those other practices. Right or wrong is sometimes a bit strong, and in this case, I wouldn't say right or wrong. I remember as a student in seminary, sometimes on weekdays, people would in fact make a prostration when the priest said thine own of thine own, and just stay there on the ground until the Mother of God was commemorated. So very similar to what you're explaining there. But that was the minority of people I saw in the Russian Orthodox Church, and probably the majority were standing and doing prostrations at the end of the consecration of the gifts. So I hope that helps shed some light and not confusion. Good. I see.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lydia.
I did have one other question going back to what you started off by saying, and you said you built strength by resistance.
Yes.
I think for that's could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure.
I guess.
Sure. I'll be happy to do that. And while I'm thinking of it, I'm going to try to find the really lovely quote by Dorotheus about this. Here it is. Great. And I would say that I use this quote probably more than any other right now, especially when I'm talking with other priests. And here it is. If a man is doing something according to God, trial of some kind will come upon him. For trial and temptation either precede or follow all good. Neither is it sure that the thing is happening according to God, unless it is proved so by trials and temptations. So Venerable Dorotheus of Gaza, he was appointed to educate the monks who were living in the desert who didn't have theological education, and in his time, and that was a time when there were a lot of monks in the desert. And so he's a very interesting person, and usually he's the first I would say, of the Holy Fathers that are read when someone goes to the monasteries to start to begin their life as a monastic, when they're first kind of still exploring that. So he's essentially saying is that if there's some resistance, that's probably good. If everything is smooth and easy, then we should question if we're really doing it right. So I hope that helps, Lydia.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Good. So in the meantime, a few other folks have joined us, and that's great. We were talking about several things, as we usually do in the beginning, and we've opened it up to questions now. So if anyone has a question that they brought with them, we'd be very happy to answer those. We talked a little bit about God, the Holy Trinity, and how crossing ourselves as we hold our hands, glorifying God, the Trinity, and Jesus Christ being completely God and completely man, is really a doxology, and how important that is for us to remember that. And then we talked a little bit about is the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament the same? And of course, the answer is yes, but the approaches were slightly different because the people are slightly different. So, any questions about those or any other things that folks would like to ask here tonight? You can raise your hand like Lydia did. I think the little hand button is on the bottom of your screen. I think that's true if you're on the phone as well. Or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. All right, so it's a standoff. And in the end, when it's a standoff, everybody loses because I just keep talking, and that's not always exactly what we want. Let's talk a little bit about our sort of balance in our lives between the things that we have to do and the things that we want to do and the things that we really need to do. So what we have to do, we have to work for our daily bread, right? We need to have our duties that we exercise in the world that allow us to feed ourselves and clothe ourselves and house ourselves and our families and so on and so forth. Those things we have to do. The things that we want to do, well, those might be things that are somewhat have to do with leisure, and everybody needs a little bit of that time, but that should probably be a relative minimum. And that can be a bit of a struggle because our society really pushes us to maximize that, to really just like leisure is our full-time job. And then the things that we're really kind of obligated to do, by obligated, I mean, don't mean things that are necessarily bad, but like going to church, saying our prayers, trying to live a life according to the gospel. And just like the gospel that we heard on Sunday about loving the Lord with all your mind, heart, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself is an aspirational thing. Of course, our entire striving as Christians is an aspirational thing, but we make progress by aspiring and striving. And as we talked about with the Saint Dorotheus quote, also when there's some resistance, we can kind of know that, okay, I'm probably not going in the exact wrong direction here, and I need to keep pushing. A lot of us are newer to the church, not a lot, but well, some people and many people who will listen to this, and we often go through that time after baptism, which is called a dry time, right? When we are preparing ourselves to become Orthodox Christians, everything is great and it's all zeal and everything is smooth, and it's just like we flip the switch on our prayers and everything is great, and it just seems to go just wonderfully. And then sometime after our coming into the church, whether that's by baptism or chrismation, at some point we start to hit a wall. But the thing is, it's so common that it even has a name. It's called a dry time. And this is where we get to really struggle without quite as much support maybe from the Lord, we would say. Just as every athlete needs to train and needs to have that resistance in order to train and become stronger, build more muscle mass, that's true in the spiritual life too. It's not that the Lord abandons us. In fact, during the dry time, he's probably closer to us than at any other time in our lives. But he allows us to feel that struggle, that we need to begin to learn to struggle ourselves and begin to strengthen our spiritual muscles, if we may say that, by that little bit of resistance. So that is the case for almost all of us. And nonetheless, if we know that, if we realize that it's just so common, it even has a name. There was a movie, I don't remember exactly when it came out, but it was about a nuclear weapon being lost. And I remember the pilots who lost it were talking, and one said to the other, what disturbs me the most is that there's actually a name for this. It means it must happen pretty often. Like, this isn't some kind of rare occurrence. I think it was called Broken Arrow. Anyway, that I always found that really funny. But if there's a name for something, it's not that odd. It's not that unusual. And for all of us, we go through at least one dry time in our lives, and that's usually not that long after we come into the church. And sometimes it circles back. Some people, I personally struggled every single Great Lent that I was at seminary. I remember very specifically that it was every single one was a great struggle for me. But I can see that was really important for my spiritual growth. So I'm certainly not upset about that, but I experienced it too, and most people do. So anyway, I thought that would be a little interesting piece for folks to remember, that just because things don't seem to be going smoothly, as smoothly as you might like them to, maybe the fact that they're not going smoothly as you might like them to is really a good sign, a sort of positive feedback that we have, that is, if we're having some struggle, we're probably moving in the right direction. All right. Other questions that folks have after I give my little oration there? I see a hand up, and it's Lydia.
Sorry,
and Brian too. Let's have Lydia, ladies first, and then Brian.
Okay, so as you know, I am a convert to Orthodoxy, and I've been reading about the memorials that the Orthodox give. And again, my parents, who are now deceased, were not Orthodox. So in addition to giving names for them to be read at the Sunday service, what else could I do to commemorate them or to assist them? In the book that I'm reading, it's called a I can't even say it, Handbook of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Mm-hmm. And it says, once they're dead, they're dead. They can do nothing more to help themselves or whatever, but your memorials and things, your pleas are what, you're appealing to God to have mercy on your loved ones. Mm-hmm. So what more could I do?
So it's a great question. And so, of course, the church prays for everyone, whether they're Orthodox or not Orthodox. If the prayers are asked, we pray. Now, in the Divine Liturgy, it's done slightly differently. So for Orthodox people, when a name is sent into the altar, then we take a small piece of the prosphora and we put that onto the discus, and later that's poured into the blood of Christ with the prayer, "Wash away, Lord, the sins of those here commemorated." For non-Orthodox people, we don't put them onto the discus, not because we don't love them, but in their lifetimes they weren't Orthodox, and it seems weird to kind of say, okay, well now you're dead and you're Orthodox. It's kind of like how the Mormons baptize the dead. It just doesn't really make sense. But after the consecration of the gifts, we do pray for all of those people in the altar and ask the Lord to have mercy on them. So I think that that's an important distinction. Now, as far as helping those who have gone on before, one thing that we can do, this is both for Orthodox and not Orthodox people, we can look to the ancient church and how did the people then try to help themselves and help their relatives that have gone on before us, because our prayers are not without some efficacy before the Lord. We're not going to pray someone who ran away from God their entire lives into the heavenly kingdom, but nonetheless, our prayers help them, and our prayers help us too, because showing love through prayer certainly is pleasing to God, and the Lord doesn't forget the efforts that we make on behalf of others. One thing you saw in ancient Rome that was very common, this of course was a time when the church was united, there was no separation between the churches. People often would leave money to assure that in their name the poor were fed. And I've always found that really interesting, that there would be a divine service would be served for the person, and then they would have a meal for the poor and ask their prayers. And I always just found that really, really touching and beautiful. And in a way, we kind of have that practice. We continue to have that practice with the memorial meals that we sometimes arrange after a funeral or after on the yearly anniversary when someone has passed away. on the annual anniversary when someone has passed away. Some families will bring food to the church and we'll eat that together after the Sunday service and ask for prayers for those who have gone on before us. So this idea, I think, is a really beautiful one. And I remember as a student in seminary, when often when we would have a funeral, which was not very unusual, weekly, couple times weekly, because many people want to be buried in the monastery, and so we'd have a funeral and a burial, and a lot of times the family would arrange to have some kind of special something for the monks and for the seminarians. Like we were big fans of those people who wanted to make sure we had some ice cream or something like that. And sometimes people would prepare an entire meal as well. But we would remember the people that had passed on. We would pray for them, and so we do still kind of have that tradition, but not as much as it was in Rome, where they'd like just in the streets they would set up tables and bring food and feed the poor and ask prayers for those who have gone. So I think, Lydia, that may be something that you could consider to arrange, maybe annually around the time of their repose, to have a meal on Sunday in the church and to ask folks to remember to pray for them. That seems very, very much in line with the practice of the church over the last 2,000 years. Okay, and Brian had a question too, so I hope that answered your question, Lydia. And if it didn't, just raise your hand again and make me focus more closely if I didn't quite answer. Brian, what did you have a question about?
Yeah, mine was with regards to the fast, and I noticed on the church website that there appear to be three kinds of fasts as I see it. It looks like there's one that says fish, sometimes it says wine and oil, and then I forget what the term is, a hard fast or an extreme fast or something like that. Can you explain kind of what you do in each of those, and then kind of the purpose?
Sure. A strict fast, I think it probably says something like that.
That's right.
Yeah. So you're right. There are different gradations of the way that we fast, and those are directly related to what's happening in the church. So what's happening in the church has a direct impact on what is happening on our table. So Wednesdays and Fridays, generally throughout the year, are fasting days. If on a fasting day there is a saint which is celebrated, or a feast day which is kind of not huge, but not nothing. I don't want to say not nothing, but not simple. Kind of in the middle, then we would probably have wine and oil on those days. If it's a big feast day or a really well-known popular saint, then because the service in the church is more festive, then what's on the table is more festive. So these things are directly related. How strictly we fast has to do with the service in the church. The more festive, then the less strict, and the less festive, the more strict. In the ancient church, and even I would say not just in the ancient church, but even unto about maybe 250 years ago, the kind of saint you were determined the kind of service that you had. So like all martyrs were a simple service, for instance. And the different gradations of service are simple, 6 Stachira, double, which means there's 2 saints on that day, great doxology, polyaleos, which means much oil or much mercy. You might guess that on those days oil is always allowed, and a vigil, and then a great feast. So we have those gradations, and essentially it's just kind of like a straight line we can think of. And it doesn't mean that the simple one is worse or less important. It just has to do with the way that the service is done in the church. So if it's a simple service, then it's likely to be a much more stricter fasting day. If it's a great feast, then it's not going to be nearly as strict a fasting day, and probably not a very strict fasting day. Now, these things are they sort of build on each other. So a strict day would be strictly speaking, without wine and oil. Then the next step is with wine, um, and with wine and oil. And then the next one is fish, but that also includes with wine and oil. So just so people understand that it's not like you on that day you would not have wine if it was a fish day. Those are they kind of build on each other. Now, the strictness of fasting can be clearly sort of understood when you, and God willing, you will all get that opportunity, visit the Holy Land. Because when you understand just how decadent hummus with fresh olive oil or baba ganoush or something like that can be, you realize that, oh, I see now why there have to be fast days without oil. Because I mean, just something like that, which is made in that culture and fresh, is so wonderful and delicious that if that was the strictest way you ever fasted, you'd never understand any kind of strictness at all. Because even though we would think of that as pretty simple, it's really quite, I would say decadent is the word. Not in a, I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just really, you could live on the hummus and olive oil, no problem there. So the idea of having to make something stricter makes some sense when you see that. In the north, in the Slavic lands especially, when we're talking about oil, it's not like there's olive trees, dotting the Arctic Circle. You gather the olives, and press them and so on. So it's, you might have a few sunflower seeds to grind together and get a couple drops of oil. So the sort of how carefully you follow this gradation about oil, especially in the southern churches where olives grow, it's followed very strictly because that's, as I said, it can be quite decadent to have all of those things. In the very north, where, like I said, you might squeeze together a couple of sunflower seeds to get a drop of oil, that's not followed as carefully, the oil part. So that's an interesting approach. Not right, not wrong, but slight differences in the different Orthodox cultures based on the reality of the food that they have. So hopefully that at least partially answered your question there, Brian.
Yeah, maybe just one follow up on the same topic. If
Yeah,
I may.
please.
Is as probably a dumb question, but a strict fast, I would imagine, is no food and is it no water, no anything, or?
So I would say that if we look at the Typicon, which is the sort of rule book of the church, essentially a strict fast means not eating until 3 p.m. Right? So if you look at so that's the strict fast, would be not eating, not having water. No, I don't think that's not really a thing. I mean, you can find that in the Desert Fathers that they were kind of strict with themselves about water, but that's about all. I mean, it doesn't make sense to drink water continuously or something like that, but we would not generally deprive ourselves of that, and surely on a strict fast day, in most Orthodox cultures, if there was not going to be divine liturgy, then in the monasteries for sure you would find people would have a coffee.
And the fast begins the nightfall of the day prior.
Strictly speaking, yes, but practically speaking, when we go sundown to sundown, we just cheat. That's just our natural kind of unfortunate sort of approach. So what would happen is right before sundown on Tuesday, we would have our non-Lenten meal. And then just after sundown on Wednesday, we would also have a non-Lenten meal. And we end up almost not fasting at all if we do it from sundown to sundown. But that is the way the liturgical day works. The day begins with Vespers, which happens at the time that the sun goes down. But in our days, especially, we generally fast midnight to midnight, because otherwise, like I said, we just start to cheat. And it's not even in a bad way. It's just that's our kind of unfortunate natural inclination. So if we do midnight every night, then we tend to be safer.
Got it. Thanks.
You're welcome. Grisha, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, forgive me if this question is a bit too speculative, but it was really interesting. When you were talking about the slight differences between kind of northern or Russian styles of fasting and the Mediterranean styles. My question would be, do you think that, in the next like 100 years, as God willing, America becomes more orthodox, that we might have like maybe our own type of tradition around fasting that maybe is um, how to say it, like more conducive to the age that we live in. Like, for example, there's so many vegan options that just replace a lot of things that doesn't even feel like you're fasting sometimes.
So I think the answer to that is probably yes, but it is a little speculative. Um, but that is what happens in every Orthodox culture. Um, the the culture bends to the church, and the church sanctifies the culture. So, um, if I had to guess, and it's a total guess, uh, I think that it's entirely possible that the idea of fasting not just having to do with what's on your plate, but also when you eat, would be something that would be very conducive to North American life. Because at least at this point, we can have anything. There is, I mean, we are living in such a time when there are just almost unlimited options for us. And even if on a fast day, for some reason, we feel like we need to eat some meat, we can have some of that, stuff which is made from tofu or even the nicer things. So not that that's evil. The Lord put us in this time and in this place because this is where we can best save our souls. So it's not that we should, necessarily refuse that, but because of the sort of rise of technology and especially at least at this point food technology, my guess is that we will probably uh, reinvigorate the concept of not just what's on your plate, but kind of fasting a little deeper into the day. And with some of the young people, we've already sort of begun to have some of those conversations about how, it may not be just that it's okay to have, three huge Lenten meals on a Lenten day for a young, strong person, but maybe they should also be considering when they have that first meal. So that's a good question. You're welcome. But I'm not saying that that's the rule for everybody or that's absolutely where it's going to go. But I kind of feel like that's where it might go. So anyway, good questions. Does anyone else have questions that they've thought of or that they brought with? Several folks have jumped on, and so welcome to everybody who's joined us in this last bit of conversation that we've been having. Uh, Several people have said, "Well, this might be a dumb question." There are no dumb questions. When you're with me, there can be dumb answers, but there are no dumb questions, and I hope that people will ask questions that they're thinking of, because if you're thinking of it, someone else who's with us probably is, and surely someone who will watch this afterwards is thinking about this. So please consider that as you ask your question. Yeah, I heard somebody raise their hand, and it's Brian. Go ahead.
I was wondering if you could recommend a good kind of catechism resource for catechumens into the church.
There are a lot. And I think on one level, it sort of has to do with each person, because some folks are sort of better with reading, and some folks are better with video, and some people are better, with audio. And so we did put one resource together here, and I'm going to try to present to the screen here now. So hopefully we're not going to cause any major issues. And see if we can, if I can share with you there it is, our catechism resources page. So hypothetically, no one is crashing and everyone will see shortly our page. Avoid an infinity mirror, don't share your entire screen or browser window. Okay, you're not seeing anything, are you? You just see like this St. Vladimir logo.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's not as helpful. I don't know what an infinity mirror is, but it looks like I may have tried to create one, so hopefully we haven't caused any kind of major damage to the earth here. Let me try this one more time and see if we explode. Share. There we go. Okay, so here's our catechism resources page. You can see there that we have some things that are that you can read, and as you go down, there are more resources, and as you go down, there are videos and there's audio and so on and so forth. So there's a ton of stuff there, and I would recommend to folks to visit that space, and that would be a good place to begin. It's not the end by any means, but that's a good place to begin, and I will put the link to that in our in the notes here, and everybody should get that. And it's probably made a little noise in your ears, and if you look in the in-call messages, you'll see the link there. So in any case, that's a good place to start, and there are more, but have a look there, and then we can kind of go from there. And I'm more than happy to talk to you about other things if nothing there sort of hits the spot. We'll also have adult catechism beginning on October 6th. And that will be, we'll do it like this, where you can sign on. I'm encouraging people to come in person if at all possible, because that dynamic of in person is just, I find it warmer and I think better than doing it online, but we'll offer it online. Especially because we have some folks in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They don't have a priest yet, but they're ready to start their catechism. So we'll have them with us online. So if it doesn't work for your folks to be there every time in person, they'll be able to join online. Okay, Lydia, I see that you have a question.
Yes, I'm sorry again, because this seems a little off topic, but just things I'm wondering about. Where to get some information on the status of the heavens before Satan and the fall of the angels, and the hierarchy ranking of the angels, and how that was all came about, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah.
We never
Saint
know.
Yeah, Saint Dionysius the Areopagite wrote about that. And let me think about that. I can put a link. It'll take a second for me to find it, but I don't think more than a second. I think it's listed with on November 8th in the Lives of the Saints, because that is the bodiless hosts, Saint Michael and the bodiless hosts. Let's see if I'm right. If I am, then I'll have it for you right now, and if I'm not, then we'll have to dig deeper. Yes, that's correct. It's a little bit disturbing that I remembered that, and now I put that in the notes also. So if you go to that link that I just posted there, it has a big explanation of the different ranks of the saints, and it talks a little bit about the heavens before the fall of Satan. And Lydia, if you want to know more, then just send me a note and I'll look for other things, but that'll be a good start.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome. Okay, great. Anyone else have questions that they'd like to talk about? Probably everybody has lots of questions. It's just a matter of sort of saying, okay, I'm gonna bite the bullet here and unmute myself, or hit that raise my hand thing and ask a question. Okay, so I want to make sure that everybody knows that this show, it'll probably be up tomorrow. I was able to put the last Mondays up pretty quickly, so God willing, that'll happen again. And we'll be able to have that up on Facebook, and folks can ask questions there too. Facebook, sorry, on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and you can ask questions there. There's comments under every YouTube video, unless someone turns them off, who posts it, but we don't turn it off. So you can leave comments there, and those comments can be a question for next time. It can be something that you thought of when you're looking at it, or it can be something that just popped into your mind, or you can always send me an email or a text. And what happens when you send me an email and a text, I put it in my phone. My phone is right here. You don't see it, but it has my list from last time, since the last time, and I put it there, and we talk about it when we get together. Okay, I see that Grisha has a question. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, so I didn't mean to interrupt us if we're just about to end, but I just something came
No,
to
no.
my mind. So with our son, when we're trying to like go venerate the cross or venerate different icons with him, do we when I'm crossing myself, can I also cross him?
So the answer is yes. Parents can make the sign of the cross over their children. One Christian can make the sign of the cross over another one, but you don't do it the way that a priest does it. So a priest or a bishop will hold their hands like this. So that this finger is I, this is C, this is X, of course, and this is C, right? So Jesus. A priest and a bishop make the sign of the cross that way, giving a blessing to someone. Because they've been ordained to be able to consecrate the gifts. So, for instance, a deacon wouldn't do that because he's not been, he cannot serve the sacraments, but he can help with all the sacraments. So, a priest and a bishop hold their hands like this, but a layman would hold their hands like this, just like you're crossing yourself. You would cross your child, top, bottom, left, right, and that's perfectly okay to do. I see a lot of parents do that at night to the kids before they go to sleep. The kids will come and the parents will make the sign of the cross over them. It's a very nice tradition, I think, and it's very orthodox. So yes, that's nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, I would say that it's probably even good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I hope everybody learned something new tonight, and that what we talked about also causes some reflection and maybe some questions. And I hope that you'll be able to join us next Monday, and that you'll bring some of those questions with you or send them forward so that we can answer them when we begin our show. So since we've wrapped up, I would say for the day, for the evening, let's say a prayer and then we'll say good night. It is truly meet to bless thee, the Theotokos, ever blessed and most blameless and mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and beyond compare more glorious than the seraphim, who without corruption gave us birth to God, the Word, the very Theotokos, be doing many. Good night, everyone. Glad you're able to join us.